everybody. So it looks like people are just starting to come in, so we're gonna wait a second. Yeah. It's my first time being on the other end of a Zoom webinar, so I'm like really weirded out because I can't see anybody's faces right now. But I don't know if I can even do that on my end. So we'll just give it a couple seconds for everyone to come in. Hi. Yeah. Okay. So a couple things just in terms of housekeeping stuff. Yeah, you guys are all automatically muted. And so I didn't realize there's a difference in Zoom. You can be a panelist or an attendee, and only panelists can mute and unmute themselves and turn their video on and off, whereas attendees can't do that. So you guys are all registered as attendees, meaning that if you basically, when we're having the conversation, if you guys want to say something, like basically the second half of tonight or the main part of tonight, which is where everyone gets to talk. What we can kind of do, and I'll repeat this once everyone gets here because there's only about half of us here right now, and I want to give everyone a couple minutes to get in. So if you're here now, you're going to hear me say this. Like, I'll repeat myself on a couple things just so everyone gets to hear it. But I can, basically what you do is you put your hand up. There's a thing, it should be on the bottom, that allows you to like raise hand. You can also lower your hand too once you raise it. But if you want to comment on something when I like saying, like I'm opening the floor to like, now everyone can kind of jump in on their interpretations, and we can have kind of a discussion. Basically how you do it is you just click to either raise your hand, or if you don't want to talk, like I know in Zoom webinars, I really hate, like I've done like online classes through Zoom and I really hate having to talk, but oftentimes I want to share something, so I'll just type it in the chat, and I can see the chat kind of as you guys are, yeah, I can see the chat here too, so I might, like if you say something in the chat and it's in like a question form, I'll answer it out loud instead of typing back, just because it would be, yeah, it's just easier on my end instead of typing. So yeah, I'm probably gonna wait till like 10 after 6, maybe like 6:05, depending on, we had about 30, a little over 30 people registered. There's someone whose name isn't on their profile, not that I'm calling anyone out, but just so you know, if you put your hand up and I won't be able to tell you that I'm allowing you to talk because I don't know your name. So just a heads up if people are like weirded out that I'm not asking them to put their hand up or asking them to talk using their name, it's because your name isn't on your profile. That's all. Cool. Okay. And I also, nope, Jess, your name's on there, so don't worry, you're on there. Your name's already on your profile. It was when you registered. No, it's not you, Zoe. Your name's on your profile. Nope. I can see your name. Oh, you can't see your own names? If you hover your, okay, at the top, I'm doing this off of memory because this is not how my screen looks like, but the way your screen looks like, at the top, you should be able to see like where all of the videos are of people's screens. You should be able to hover your mouse over there and your name should pop up. Yeah, so. And then the other thing, I also apologize. I thought that you could turn your own video off, and you can't. So if you, the way it's recording, I don't believe, I believe it's only recording myself. I don't believe it's recording any of your videos. Okay, so if you want to be able to see your video, at the bottom left, there's two options to, there should be mute and stop or start video. So if you guys will go to the bottom left of your screen, it should allow you to do that, if I'm remembering correctly. Just let me know if that option isn't there and if there's anyone who can't turn their video on. Strange. Okay, let me see. And thank you all for being super patient, and also let me see. There we go. All right, so I'm promoting everyone to a panelist, so this will allow you to control your video. So if, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna promote everyone to panelists. Just give me a second to go through the list of everyone. There we go. I knew this looked super weird. Thank you for sitting with me patiently as I figure this out. I thought I read all the like tutorials on this, but apparently, yeah, we'll just, here we go. Yay. Yeah, I was getting kind of bored of just hearing my own voice. I was like, where is everyone? Oh shoot, wait, no. I'm so sorry, I was talking to myself. I accidentally clicked remove instead of promote, and I almost removed Zoe. Sorry, Zoe, love you. Zoe's my former roommate, so it's like, I guess of all the people to like remove, that would be the least awkward one. And oh yeah, if you guys have to leave early, that is totally not a problem whatsoever. The one thing that we're going to be doing is calling in, at least it's something that I personally do in my tarot readings and that I wanted to bring to this, is calling in our ancestors. So, because I don't work with like any like gods, so instead I work with ancestors. And if you do choose to call in your ancestors like on your own in your head, as we're kind of getting in the zone, I would highly recommend, if you have to leave early, to make sure you like tell them to leave and that it's over, just so you don't have like ancestors hanging around, unless you want them to hang around afterwards. But just like, that's something that we'd be doing at the end of today, or at the end of the recording. And so if you're leaving early, you'll just want to make sure that you do that, because you won't get to with us. So I think, okay, so I will be promoting, as people, I'm assuming some folks are going to be coming in a little bit late, so as people show up as attendees, I might kind of stop what I'm doing to promote them to panelists. But yeah, other than that, I'm just seeing if there's any other housekeeping things. Okay, in terms of the structure of the evening, we're gonna quickly go over some housekeeping stuff, have some time for any questions in case there's just like, yeah, any questions you have about how tonight's gonna go. We're gonna do a really quick invocation. I'm gonna shuffle some cards and pull them, and then I'm gonna outline the spread for you, because my screen, like, I'm aware my laptop's about 4 years old, so the video quality is definitely subpar. And so instead of like trying to show you the cards, I'm gonna give you a second to pull the cards up on your own so you have them out in front of you. And I just find that sometimes being able to actually see the layout of the spread is really helpful when trying to kind of see like how the cards interact, like even visually, like are like two cards facing each other, like, you know, do we have two court cards that are facing each other and they're both looking at each other, or maybe they're both looking to the right or they're both looking to the left, just like all of those kinds of nuances that some people like to pick up on. I find it really helpful to lay out the spread myself, so I will give like a good couple minutes so you're not rushed to be able to find all of your cards. And then I'm gonna really quickly like read the spread and just like run through kind of how I would interpret it, just to give it some like structure and like a formal, and we won't spend a whole lot of, hopefully not a whole lot of time on this. And then afterwards, I'm gonna give for the person receiving the spread, I asked my former roommate, just because I've read that was a person I started practicing reading tarot on, and because it's my first time doing this, I just thought it would be a lot easier to ask them to be the person receiving the spread, because I'm a little nervous. But yeah, in the future, like it'll be kind of open, like anyone can be the person receiving the spread. It's just for this time, it'll be Zoe. So I'm going to give Zoe some time to kind of comment on the spread, or anything that they personally relate to it, because I know they also practice tarot themselves too. And then after that, it'll be kind of like an open floor for everyone to do the thing where you raise your hand, and then I will kind of hopefully just chronologically go through everyone whose hands are raised. So yeah, and then once again, just because there's a couple people who came in, I think maybe after I said this, but you don't have to click the thing at the bottom to raise your hand to talk. You can also just put your message in the chat, where we can all see it, and then you don't have to talk out loud, because I have a lot of social anxiety. And I know when I do Zoom webinars, I really hate talking out loud. I'd rather just put something in the chat. So I will see, I'll see that. And if it's a question or something, I might comment on it out loud instead of typing back, just because it's faster for me. Yeah, and then we will do I will just really quickly ring my singing bowl again and do a really quick thank you to close the space with our ancestors. So there's no kind of spirits hanging around my house, or I guess hanging around our Zoom call. I'm really not sure how this works energetically, but cool. Okay, so I guess Jess asked a question, and we'll start with that. And if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the type part, or raise your hand. The chat box, or raise your hand. So, okay, the practice of collective tarot. Collective tarot is originally a name of a deck that's out of print that I really want. It's also I guess it just came from my background in tarot being a degree in history and political science. So I was used to talking about the collective as through that lens, and then was looking at the how Rachel Pollack structures the 3 lines of the major arcana. The first line being our conscious, second line being subconscious, and third line being superconscious. And to me, it made the most sense of the first line being about our individual identities and our ego, and the second line being the transformation to the third line, where we understand our role in the collective. And so I think collective tarot for me made sense in a practical level, because I would get a lot of energetic hits and make connections on a collective level. All of my tarot readings for the week, all of the tarot clients would have a common theme or message that was coming through kind of for everybody on a collective level. So sometimes I'll share those on Instagram. But yeah, not all the times, but yeah, that's kind of what I mean by collective tarot. I'm not sure if that directly answers your question, but I also needed a name for how doing a group reading, but on a video call instead of in an actual room physically together. So to me, collective tarot made a lot of sense that way too. It's a reading kind of to symbolize the fact that we're giving a reading to an individual, but also how interconnected being an individual and the collective are, and that through giving a reading to one person, there's probably going to be parts of that reading that really resonate with us too, as a collective, and kind of things that maybe we're all moving through, or things that are all kind of affecting us. Not that the entire reading applies to all of us, but there's probably parts of it that are medicine or can be helpful. So yeah, and okay, one last thing. I do know I said or structured it to be 3 hours. I just didn't want it to like shut off like automatically because the thing was like out of time, but we were still having a conversation. So I'm not actually expecting it to go 3 hours. I just wanted to give like ample time, so it doesn't, yeah, shut off in the middle of us talking. So yeah, well, this is my first time doing it, so yeah, we'll see how long it takes. I have no idea. Okay, so with all of that being being said, I'm going to start. I've just got some incense over here and a candle. And so when I'm doing like ancestor work at my altar, I like to light a candle. And then I'm using wormwood and lavender for incense. There's a lot of different things you can use for incense with ancestor work, but today I just happen to have lavender and wormwood on hand, so that's what we're using. I often will use rose petals too. So I'll just get that going. We welcome holy ancestors of wisdom, understanding, healing, and blessings into this sacred space. With this offering, we honor those who have come before us and those who have yet to come. We thank the ancestors of spirit that inspire us. We thank the plant and animal ancestors of land and place. And we thank the ancestors of blood and bone. Cool. And now I'm just going to shuffle the cards for a little bit and pull them. And as I pull them, I will let you guys know like what they are, so that way you can either write it down alongside the spread that I sent out over email, or you can like look for it in your deck, whichever is easiest for you guys. I also really anxiously like shuffled my deck basically from 5 to 6 p.m. because I was like sitting here trying to figure out how to use Zoom and then just like waiting for 6 p.m. to come around. So it's been like shuffled for a solid 45 minutes, I think. The deck that we're going to be using is the Slow Holler. It's out of print, but I would highly recommend just emailing them if you want one, because then they might do a second print round. Cool. I think it's good. Okay. So the first card is for the present moment through the lens of divine. What that just means is sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes the card for the present moment doesn't always resonate for the person it's being pulled, because it's through the lens of like the universe, or through the lens of our ancestors, or through the lens of like whatever God maybe we're asking wisdom for, depending on who we're asking for wisdom. Some people say spirit or source, universe, whatever you personally use. So it's from their perspective, not ours. So that like there's sometimes where it's kind of like trying to fit the ocean into a can of pop. Like our perspective is all we can fit into like a pop can, and we're trying to fit the entire ocean in there. So that's all I kind of mean by through the lens of divine. Yeah. So that card is the Death card. And I'm so glad I'm doing this reading for my roommate, because now it's like not super scary. Zoe's laughing. Hey. Okay, so that's the card for the present moment. The card for what crosses or flows with the present moment is Judgment reversed. In my deck, the Judgment card is named Awakening. So when talking about the card, we'll probably use the word Awakening, and I actually prefer it better than Judgment. Like even in cards, even in decks that I'm using where the card is normally Judgment, I call it Awakening and interpret it that way. So if I say Awakening, I'm also referring to Judgment reversed. The next card is the Lesson or Wisdom, which is the Four of Swords, which is kind of funny because I'm pretty sure when I was showing you guys the deck, that was a card that was on the bottom of the pile. So the next card is the root of the reading, which is the Three of Wands. And then the fifth card is a cycle that we're coming out of, which is the Wheel of Fortune. Okay, so the Wheel of Fortune showed up reversed. I actually don't use reversals only for the Wheel of Fortune because it's a circle. It's cyclical. There's no up or down. So yeah, I just wanted to note that. I don't know if people do use reversals for the Wheel of Fortune. It's the only card I don't use a reversal for. The next card is our behavior, or like our mask, our external face, how we're moving through the world, which is the Tower reversed. Dang, we're getting all the heavy hitters. Sorry, Zoe. The next card is the Near Future, which is the Moon reversed. The card for the Innermost Feelings is the Nine of Branches reversed. And I'm just going to make a little bit more space on my table here. Our next card is the Hopes and Fears, which is the Two of Swords. And then we have the Big Picture, which is the Ace of Swords reversed. And the outcome is the Page of Cups reversed. I'm just pausing because, or saying it really slowly because the Slow Hauler renamed a lot of the cards so that they're gender neutral. They also renamed the court cards and they renamed the suits. So what my deck says on it, for example, the Nine of Wands is actually the Nine of Branches. So if I say a word that you're unfamiliar with, just like send me a message in the chat box being like, what's the Nine of Branches? So I know that I like used the wrong one. Yeah, I'm just gonna give everyone a minute or two to, if you want to pull those cards out of your deck. Let me know if you want me to go over the cards again too. The card for the Near Future. Do you guys want me to just like really quickly, yeah, run through them all? Cool, okay. So the card for the present moment is the Death card. The card for what crosses or flows with the present moment is Awakening reversed. The card for the Lesson or the Wisdom is the Four of Swords. The card for the root of the reading is the Three of Wands. The card for what's cycling out is the Wheel of Fortune. The card for our behavior or our mask, how we're moving through the world, is the Tower reversed. The card for the Near Future is the Moon reversed. The card for the Innermost Feelings is the Nine of Wands reversed. The card for the Hopes and Fears is the Two of Swords. The card for the Big Picture is the Ace of Swords reversed. And then the card for the outcome is the Page of Cups reversed. Okay, so I'm just gonna really quickly kind of run through how I would interpret it if I was doing a reading for Zoe and I. I guess, oh, I'm so sorry. People are still looking for cards in their deck, so I'm gonna wait. Sorry about that. I'll grab a drink of water. If at any point you need to like run to the bathroom, or like depending on how long this is, like bathroom breaks are totally fine. You can just like leave your computer. I'm not gonna be like, oh no, this person's leaving the room. Oh, and I just noticed, okay, so there's 16 of us here, and the card for our behavior or how we're moving through the world or our external mask is card 16, the Tower, and I think that's kind of cute, just because it's like literally physically together how we are all here moving together, so yeah. And also, I believe now that I've turned everyone into panelists, that means you can unmute yourself when you want to talk. So kind of depending on how the flow of everything goes, I think because there's only 16 of us, it should be okay when we're having the discussion at the end for you to just unmute yourself when you're about to go talk. So far, all the webinars that I've done through Zoom, even with like larger groups, we've done okay with that. It hasn't really been like too awkward or too much of a problem. So I don't know, I think we can kind of, especially because we can see each other's faces too, we can kind of feel that out. And if it gets too complicated, we'll go back to like the raising your hand method and I'll personally unmute you. So I think we're almost all ready. There's just a couple people finding their cards. So I'm going to start running through how I would interpret the spread. And yeah, because that will still give you plenty of time to kind of find the cards in your deck if you're looking for them. Okay. So it's kind of cool because now I get to jump into a little bit more of tarot theory with the major arcana, how I was talking about before. We have like the first, second, third line, and how I interpret them as like our individual egoic identity, the like transformation that happens in the death card when we go through like the death of our individual identity and our rebirth into our collective identity. And then, yeah, and then so we also have some cards of the third line. So, yeah, so the card for the present moment is the death card. Something that I always have noticed in the imagery for the death card is we have something dying, but we also have something growing from what's decaying or what's decomposing or dying. And I feel like that brings a lot of medicine to the death card through the lens of it gets a little bit easier to work with if we start releasing our attachments to everything in terms of like our ego or identity. Oh, sorry, and I just noticed Zoe's comment. Zoe, if you want, you can unmute yourself for the reading and like jump in on stuff. I know normally when we do readings, we've always kind of gone back and forth instead of you waiting until the end to comment on something. So if you want, you can unmute yourself and like interrupt me or jump in at any point if you want to like comment on something. Yeah, for sure. But yeah,
Cool.
so going back to the death card, it's, oh, Zoe, do you have like stuff, like background
Oh,
noise?
my roommates are watching TV. One sec.
Okay, yeah.
I'm gonna
Well, if
close
you
my
want to
door.
just, yeah, close your door or then just mute yourself if like there's going to be background noise, just so it doesn't interrupt like for other people.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think so. Cool. Okay, so the death card is, it gets easier when we start releasing our attachments to whatever we're like having to, whatever we're losing in the death card. And sometimes it's more of an internal thing, like we're going through the internal shifts and there's a lot of internal kind of rewiring of our like thought processes, or like, for example, like thought processes that are limiting us, or just like values or beliefs that we hold that are tied to our ego, and ultimately holding us back, or that's, I guess, just another reason or another way to explain thoughts that are limiting us or beliefs that are limiting us are as thoughts and beliefs that are tied to our ego, and our sense of individualism. Not that individuality is wrong, but tied, they're holding us back from understanding our role within the collective, meaning how we can be of service, or the thing that we were put on earth to accomplish that no one else can do the way we do it. Kind of like how there's like hundreds and thousands of tarot readers, but everyone kind of reads tarot differently because it's, well, we all might work with like similar traditional archetypes. It's very much infused with your own like personal practice and the way that tarot's been helpful and applies to your life. So yeah, it's like no one else can practice tarot the way I practice tarot because it's interpreted through the lens of my own personal life experience and like lived experience. So yeah, one thing that I found with the death card is like when it comes up around, sometimes the death card can come up and mean like a loss of a job or like a loss of a relationship. Not that every time it comes up, it means you're going to like end a relationship or like get fired, but that as an example for when we lose something tangible. And the death card, it's not about the thing we lose, but how our identity is attached to it and how our ego is attached to it. And that's kind of what I was talking about in the beginning with how the death card gets a lot easier if we look at it through the lens of allowing all of these things that we are releasing, or all of these things that are being taken away from us, to become compost and fertilizer and let them really decay and use them to fertilize for new growth. A lot of, because we talk about, oh, sorry, I'm almost done, Zoe. A lot of what we talk about kind of with the death card and even through the like life, death, life cycle of the Hanged Man, death and temperance, and the mother piece, they talk about it as a like a shamanic rebirth, through the lens of like shamanism. And I find specifically the thing that separates the death card from temperance being the rebirth after death, and when we do the growing, is that like the death card is really specifically about like the decay and using that like active like decaying and composting as a way to make room for whatever new stuff. It's kind of like when you're pregnant and you're having a baby, you build a nursery for the baby and make a room for it before the baby, like months before the baby's actually coming. Or even like I can relate to the death card through the lens of when I started reading tarot for other people, it really, I believe, happened because I got rid of a bunch of art supplies, and like I had this giant screen printing light table, probably with the size of a coffin or like two coffins stacked on top of each other, in my house or my living room. And I got rid of it and replaced it with an altar for my ancestors, and to use as like a meditation space. And as soon as I did that, all of a sudden, I had all of this room for like the universe to kind of work its thing, which I feel like really coincides too with the Wheel of Fortune, which we'll get to later in the spread. But yeah, it wasn't until I made that physical, tangible room in my house that I started reading tarot for strangers instead of just reading for like friends and roommates. So yeah, so I'm gonna let you now, I guess, comment on the death card.
Well, when you first pulled the death card, my immediate reaction was, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Because, like, I'm going through all of the, like, big life transitions. Like, I'm done selling soap now. That's exciting. And now I have room to, like, have days off and, like, actually, like, pursue things that I care about instead of, like, being frantic and using up all of my emotional energy trying to sell soap to people.
Just for context, you don't just like sell soap, you worked at Lush. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
I worked at Lush. But I feel like I can't, when I'm bad mouthing it, I don't like saying the name of it.
Yeah, good. Okay,
no, just because I'm like, I have space in my life now to like actually pursue things. And that's almost like, it's almost been scary, but it's been cool and interesting. And now I have these gaps where like I used to use all my emotional energy for capitalism. And now I have these like spaces in which I can do other things. And it's been like a week and I'm just like, what do I do with my time? Am I like, what do I do if I'm like not just like
slaving away in a
basically like you were talking about like finding like the stuff that you were like put on this earth that only you can do, and that's exactly where I'm at right now, with just like trying to figure that out and like making that space in my life, and the space has like just been made, so it's like what's coming next. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because we're working with the awakening reversed or judgment reversed. And so the way that I interpret judgment as like the awakening is it's the moment right before the world, meaning the end of the cycle of the major arcana and the end of our progression, or I guess you could say like journey or learning curve through the major arcana, where we realize like that everything's changed, and kind of like we're awakening to all of these shifts in our consciousness. I kind of make sense of it as like I moved away 600 kilometers from home to go to university, and the awakening for me always felt like that moment, the first time I went back home from university, and it felt like everything had changed, but then it also felt like absolutely nothing had changed and like I'd never left. And then I realized that it's like everything but, or I was the only one who changed, like really nothing else had changed. It was me. And I had that kind of like aha moment, or like that like awakening moment. When the awakening shows up reversed, it's when our nervous system kind of freaks out. Like we have the shift in consciousness, and then our nervous system is like, wait, like, fuck me. I know some decks refer to awakening or judgment as revolution. And so I've often thought of it as like the terror of revolution. And now I'm thinking of Les Miserables, but I'm not going to go there. But like you could just think of like the terror of revolution as like we've pulled off this like revolutionary thing, and it's really exciting, but also like it's like we often plan for like life under capitalism, but we don't think, or like how to overthrow capitalism, but we're never like, wait, what do we do with each other after capitalism? And I feel like that's very much like awakening reverse, like, oh, cool, like hypothetically, we've just overthrown capitalism, but now what do we do? Like, how do we do the work of rebuilding after tearing everything down?
I feel like right now too, like especially recently, I mean always, but especially recently, it's like so much coming to light how this system is failing all of us. And increasingly more and more people are just like ready, like just so ready to be done with it, and are like pursuing things in a more collective way, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially with like the context of you, like you live in Vancouver, so the kind of differences in class are a lot more apparent than say like where I am in Ottawa. Um, so yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. I'm not sure what you're going to say next.
No, that's basically like all I was saying, is that like, I don't know, I've been seeing a lot of it both like with the people that I know and also just like online, just people sort of like, well, the system is failing me either way, so I might as well like, you know, I might as well do what I want. I might as well like find this like found family and this collective and do things that way. And there's a lot more yeah, I've just been noticing a
Yeah,
lot more.
like interdependence
Yeah,
rather than
interdependent.
independence. Yeah. One thing I find helpful when working with Awakening Reversed is thinking about, like, if we're having difficulty with stepping into a card, one way we can, if that's what a reversal of a card signifies, one way we can work with it is looking at whatever we were learning in the card previously. So for example, the sun, meaning like grounding ourselves in the light and finding grounding and joy and confidence, and like the illumination and understanding and knowing that comes with being in the sun card, and grounding in all of that energy before we like fully step through like into awakening. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that in a way that's like logical and linear? Cool, yeah. Before we like step into awakening, and also carrying that lesson with us as we step from awakening into the world.
Someone just said, can you repeat that about reverse?
About the reverse cards. So sometimes I find reversals make sense in, like, for example, the Fool reverse is like this too, where we're nervous about stepping into the card or moving into the card. We're kind of like dipping our toe in the water, but we're not like jumping in. And so if we need to honor our nervous system and work with our nervous system to step fully into a card, I find it helpful to work with whatever was comfortable or comforting in the card that came before it. So for example, card 9, if awakening or judgment is card 20, card 19 is the sun. So all of the aspects of the sun that were comforting, like joy and confidence, or the all-knowing or understanding that comes with everything being illuminated and everything kind of covered in sunlight, so there's no secrets, nothing can hide, like in the moon card. There's no darkness. So really grounding in that energy of the card previous to kind of hold our hand and carry us through into the next card that we're trying to step into. And I also feel like, because awakening is like that moment where we cross the threshold before the cycle actually completes in the world, we can also kind of carry the energy and the grounding in the sun with us into the world, because we're like doing the act of crossing the threshold in awakening or judgment upright. So yeah. Okay. And then moving on into the card for the lesson of the wisdom, we have the Four of Swords. And I kind of find it kind of funny because I was thinking about the Smith Rider-Waite imagery for the Four of Swords, and it's like literally someone in a coffin. So you just have this like, it's like the death card, and then like the lesson or the wisdom of like processing or working with the death card, like what you're learning from it is like put yourself in a coffin. But it's tied to the like imagery of a coffin is tied to the like art symbolism of death just symbolizing like rest, or you could even think about it like in the Mother piece they talk about the like life death life cycle of shamanism, and how like physical death is just like a transformation or portal for like our souls. It's not an end to anything, it's just a rest. But yeah, the way I work with the Four of Swords is that fours are containers we put ourselves in to process something. I often think of it, maybe because I'm a Cancer and I'm really tied to my home, but I think of it as like a room that I put myself in where I shut the door, and like everything that happens in that room is specifically related to whatever I'm processing in the Four of, like, in the Suit of Swords, because we're working with the Four of Swords, or with the Four of Wands, it would be processing in terms of wands, or in terms of cups, or in terms of pentacles. The Four of Swords is the container or coffin we create and put ourselves in order to like heal all of the trauma that happened in the Three of Swords, after learning to like pull the swords out in the three of Swords and let the wounds scab over. We create like a space or like a sanctuary room that we can go in and do all of the healing necessary to like heal the wounds from that have like scabbed over. And I feel like personally, like in the Four of Swords, I've done a lot more. Like the Four of Swords was a moment when I figured out where in my body I hold different emotions, and I started really committing myself to like a yoga practice. Not that the Four of Swords means you need to go to yoga, or that it's just like a practice that allowed me to connect my internal self with my physical corporal like body, and like realize, oh hey, you know, like when I throw my back out for no reason, it's actually because I carry all of my trauma in my hips and in my lower back, and I need to probably go call my therapist up, because I'm also, all of this like kind of old childhood wounds are coming up to the surface, and it like literally to the point where I'm throwing my back out for no physical reason.
Just sort of the universe being like, you need to deal with this.
Yeah, like I feel like, because right now you seem pretty chill about having pulled the death card, and I mean, I guess I am glad like we have known each other for years, so it's less scary, because I have had people, when I've pulled the death card, be like, well, that's not happening.
No, I kind of like the death card, actually.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess like thinking of it as maybe a lot of Three of Swords stuff is going to come up for you through the death card, and I guess like linking it back to whatever thought processes and values and like belief systems we hold in the death card that you're now shifting and letting go of. Like I can think of a bunch specifically for you, but I also like, that's only because I know you personally, and I don't want to like, it's up to you which ones you want to talk about. I'm going to kind of draw that boundary.
No, you know what? Call me out here.
No, I'm not going to call you out. No, I'm not going to call you out. Although I know our tarot readings sometimes feel like that. But just, I feel like in terms of like kind of how you feel or have like communicated in our relationship as roommates, that you feel like the universe needs to punish you. Like, for example, Zoe and I have this thing with yellow punch buggies where, because this one summer their partner left them just for the summer to go back to their parents' farm, and Zoe made a deal with the universe that we like weren't going to do certain things, or we weren't allowed to do certain things, and then that meant Sam would come back, and yellow punch buggies were a sign from the universe that Zoe was like not
doing
doing
the
those
right
things
thing.
and doing the right things. And this idea, I feel like for you, a lot of the Four of Swords in conjunction with the shedding and the death card and the crossing of the threshold and awakening reversed, you'll be like releasing a lot of those ideas of like you owe the universe something, or you like there's something that you like this like
having
spin
to
you were in
bargain with the universe.
Yeah, like you can somehow make a deal with the universe, which I also find interesting through the lens of like the Wheel of Fortune that's going to be coming up as the cycle that you're moving out of. But yeah, I'm going to quickly move on to the root of the reading, being the Three of Branches or Three of Wands. So the Three of Wands, I think of all three as like a trinity, where because we're synthesizing and integrating things, we're learning to be three different things at once. So the Three of Wands makes a little bit more sense if I talk about it through the lens of the Two of Wands. The Two of Wands being a situation where like the world is our oyster. We can do absolutely anything like we want and it'll kind of happen with no obstacles. So it's a lot of figuring out like, if I can do anything I want, like what do I actually want to do? And then the Three of Wands is a moment where we kind of come to the end of that journey, or the end of the journey of like trying out all these different things that we can do in terms of the realm of like fire energy and like our passion and our drive and like what gets us up in the morning. And we're learning to be like both the master, meaning we've completed all of the things that we could do in the Two of Wands, the student, like still being studying whatever we were mastering in the Two of Wands. And then I think of the third, I guess you could call it like the Fool, being completely open, like an open blank canvas and being completely open to something new. So for example, for me, the Three of Wands might mean being a master, or maybe not a master, like a teacher of tarot, being still being a student of tarot at the same time and always learning and being like studying tarot, and then being completely open to maybe one day like just not practicing tarot anymore and moving on to, I don't know, like Reiki, or combining tarot with crystals, or combining tarot with therapy, and like, or I guess right now really specifically I can relate to it as like going back to school. For my like Fool moment right now is like going back to school for photography, which doesn't seem like super related to tarot, but that's kind of what I mean by like being just super open to something new and different. So that's what's rooting the reading. And I'm not sure, Zoe, if you have anything to kind of comment on that.
Yeah, like I'm trying to find a way to phrase.
Maybe that's like the openness, or the reason why you're so comfortable and like not really freaking out over the death card of like, oh no, I'm going to lose things, because it's like this idea of being open to it and not, it's softer, it's less crunchy because you're more open and receptive to it.
Yeah, like I'm definitely having like a Fool moment, like you were talking about. Like that's sort of like where I'm at right now. And I think that the three things, like the master and the student and the Fool, kind of like what you were talking about with the other cards about like processing things and dealing with things. Like I'm at a point where I feel like I'm realizing a lot of stuff about myself that I had kind of like buried or repressed or like written off or whatever. So I'm very self-aware, and I'm also like still learning a whole ton of new stuff about myself, and the like being more self-aware, I think, than I normally have been is kind of making me realize that like, all right, like there's a lot that I don't know, and I'm like open to dealing with it, and like whatever life is going to throw my way to make me deal with it. Like I'm open to that because it needs to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because I know, like, I personally really struggle with, like, the fear of the unknown, and I'm more the kind of person who would be freaking out right now because if I've never experienced something before and it's unknown to me, I'm like, oh my God, like, what the fuck is happening? And, like, my nervous system can't handle it. And I know I will self-sabotage success for myself, because success or like financial stability or like abundance are things that aren't tangible, have never been tangible for me, or aren't an experience that I've ever lived through. So my brain, because it doesn't know what that's like, fears it and will like just, yeah, do things to like sabotage myself. But yeah, so it's really cool that you're able to be like really master like the third kind of part of the trinity of being a fool and being really open.
I think all of them like have to do with one another. Like you can't be the master unless you're also like very open to being the fool.
Open. Yeah. Okay, cool. So the next card is a card for what's cycling out, which is the Wheel of Fortune. And I believe the traditional interpretation for the Wheel of Fortune is that sometimes we're at the top of the wheel and sometimes we're at the bottom of the wheel. But if we're at the bottom of the wheel, we can always come back up to the top of the wheel. And I feel like it's kind of cool because we talked about this being, not that I'm saying that the traditional interpretation is bad or wrong, but it's just never resonated for me because I don't believe that the universe is like out to get me, or that like I don't believe it's really possible to ascribe value or conditions to what it means to be at the top of the wheel or the bottom of the wheel. Kind of like how it's like you can't make a deal with the universe, or like you can't, like, we couldn't eat sushi for the whole summer and I was so mad about it. Like, you can't make a deal with the universe that you're not going to eat sushi just to like make something happen.
Just to like suffer to prove that you're suffering.
Yeah, like the way that I've always, like, as someone, so numerologically, when you add up the numbers in my birth date and then 2018, so June 29th, 2018, they boil down to 10, or the Wheel of Fortune. So the year that I'm moving through right now is the Wheel of Fortune. And kind of things that I've been working through. One is like this idea that I talked about in at the very, very beginning of trying to fit, like, the universe is this vast ocean and I'm trying to fit my perception of it into a pop can because that is all my limited perception can handle. And in the Wheel of Fortune, something that I've been practicing like on a really practical level is this like idea of this or something better. So like whenever I'm doing manifestation spells, it's always, instead of like at the end saying like amen or so mote it be or so be it, I say this or something better, meaning that this is the very best thing I could think of, but I am open to the fact that the universe might have something better that I can't perceive because of my limited perception from having like just lived experience. And so yeah, the Wheel of Fortune, the way, the analogy I use for it is it's kind of like being on a road trip and learning to be very open and like present so we can pay attention to when the universe offers us, like when the GPS kicks in and when the universe being our GPS that tells us, oh, hey, get off at this exit. And the reason why I don't believe that the universe is like, or the world is like sometimes, the world, the Wheel of Fortune is sometimes we're at the bottom of the wheel and sometimes we're at the top of the wheel, is because if we're using this like road trip analogy, you know, if I've got the music on too loud and you don't hear the GPS directions saying it's time to get off, you can always do a detour and like turn around and get off at the next highway exit. And it doesn't mean that you're losing the invitation, that all of a sudden you've like missed out on this opportunity and it's never going to happen again and you're at the bottom of the wheel. It's more just like now you get to, like, the invitation is still there. It's just like, are you paying attention, and like, did you figure it out this time? And I know one analogy that I frigging love for the universe is, or sorry, I don't know why I keep saying the universe. One analogy that I love for the Wheel of Fortune is Lindsay Mack uses the analogy of baking a cake. And the universe is kind of like, I keep calling this card the universe. I'm so sorry. The world is this situation where we're baking a cake, and you can create the exact circumstances for a cake to bake the best. Like, you put the cake in for half an hour, and you do all the chemistry of like mixing baking soda and baking powder and like to like make the cake rise. But you, at a certain point, and you can like, you set the temperature to like 350, and you butter your cake pan. But at a certain point, you have to put the cake in the oven and kind of let the universe do its thing, or like let the oven do its thing. You can't get in the oven with the cake. And so I guess using that as like a really practical analogy for what it means for the Wheel of Fortune to represent the intersection of our divinity, or like of divinity and free will, or like of predestination and free will, because I don't necessarily believe solely in predestination or solely in my free will, but I feel like the Wheel of Fortune really sums up that intersection of how those two things can be like combined. Yeah, I'm not sure if you have any kind of thoughts on what that might mean for you as a card that you're cycling out of. Or the cycle that you're...
Because I remember that was actually one that was pulled in our last reading too.
Oh, cool.
And I'm just like trying to think of what we were talking about then. Such a bad memory. I'm sorry.
I feel like if I can like maybe kind of connect the dots from what I know like about you, I feel like maybe the Wheel of Fortune is related to you moving to Vancouver from Ottawa, and like taking that kind of, not that the Wheel of Fortune always represents like a leap of faith, like the Fool, but more of like following an inner knowing when you don't necessarily have a logical explanation for it. It's just like, oh yeah, like the universe is, my GPS, the universe is telling me that I need to go here, so I'm just gonna go do it and like figure out the rest later. Like, you move to Vancouver and then like half a year later figure out how to get your cats there. Although like most people, when they move across the country, like figure out all the logistics first and then do the physical act of moving. You just were kind of like, nope, universe wants me to go here, so I'm going, and I'll figure the rest out later.
I guess the fact that I'm moving out of it, like when you say it like that, it does make sense, because like my first few months here, as you probably know, I had a bit of a hard time. And there was a lot of, should I move back to Ottawa? Should I move back to Ottawa?
Yeah.
But it was a whole bunch of like, no, I'm going to trust this decision that I made, and I'm going to see where it takes me. And now, after having trusted that decision for a while, I'm at a point where it's like, yes, I feel comfortable here. I feel good in this decision. And now I'm ready to like move on and like, see... Like, I'm done fretting over that decision, I guess. Like, I've found a place, and I've, like, rooted a little bit here now.
Yeah. I was thinking of, like, learning to spin in midair, and just, like, getting comfortable with this, like, sensation of just, like, spinning, and, like, being on the wheel and spinning in midair. Yeah. Okay. So the card for your, like, external face, or, like, how you're moving through the world, your mask, is the Tower reversed. So the way that I work with the Tower reversed is we're not we're not destroying our tower back down to the foundation, but we're just upgrading our tower. Like, we're putting a new roof on the tower, and we are upgrading the plumbing, or like we doing like the electrical work on our tower and like doing all of the upgrades. So I feel like like on a really straightforward, simple level, like to me as someone who can only see your external self, can't see really what's happening internally, it's like, well, it makes sense. You're going through a lot of upgrades, like you left your job at Lush, and like, are you now like a store manager for like
I
it like
am.
yeah,
I'm a manager. I have
which is
imposter syndrome about it still, but like,
yeah, which I feel like, I don't know, did you want to maybe talk about how, like you mentioned imposter syndrome, I don't know if like that to you is like related to being in the tower, and like the tower being like going back to your foundation, your core self or core values and beliefs, your foundational self, your foundational intentions, um, yeah, and maybe how that relates to feeling like an imposter.
yeah, it's interesting because it's like I want these good things, and like whenever I get them, I'm sort of like, oh, but it's me, and they're gonna realize. And I think like traditionally, the tower is sort of like um, burning it all down, but like I kind of, the tower to me feels like a hopeful sort of destruction. But now that it is reversed, it's like maybe this time I don't need to like burn everything down in order to rebuild. I can just sort of like go from where I'm at and like build onto the image of myself that I have, and like incorporate these new things into this image without having to go through that period of like mourning and destruction like that I normally go through.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I feel like that card's pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot to like elaborate on, but I guess if anyone has more questions about the tower later, we can also talk about that when we're done reading the spread, if I like went through it too quickly. um the card for your near future is the moon reversed, which is, I'm like laughing because it's like such a tricky card to move through. Usually like the reversals of tricky cards, like the reversal of the devil or the reversal of the tower, like
It's funny
it
because
means
I
it's
always get reversed cards, like always.
yeah. Well, like with the tricky cards, like the reversals, I find are usually means that the card's softer. It's a little bit easier. Maybe we've been through the card before, so now we're doing it the second time, and we like kind of know how things go, and we like know how to work with it to make it easier. But the reversal of the moon is like the one card where the moon gets like harder. If the moon is a card about like, okay, so stepping into the near future, meaning you don't get to see the big picture anymore. I feel like it's almost like, okay, you think you've figured out the wheel of fortune and how to be like open to whatever the universe offers you as a cycle you're leaping. And so now you're like walking into the dark, literally like do not get to see the big picture like whatsoever. And you really have to like trust your intuition on when you make or take like your next step. You don't get to see the big picture in terms of like plotting your next move career wise. You just kind of have to do intuitively what feels right. So yeah, it's like, and the upright, that's, I guess that's more so like the upright of the moon card, the reversal of it just being like a more intense version of that. And it's like this idea of like if I'm like, if I like push you into like a corn maze in the middle of the night and it's like dark, and like not only is it dark, but like the moon card reverse would be I'm blindfolding you or something, and it's like even darker if that's possible, and now you have to figure out your way through this corn maze and at midnight blindfolded. So that's what you're stepping into.
It's also
um,
it's interesting because like I feel like this ties back in with like the death and awakening, because I know that some people are a lot more comfortable doing things intuitively and like moving intuitively, but like I know I personally am so much more comfortable working in the sun card than the moon card.
Are you calling me out right now?
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
So I like much prefer being in the moon because I'm like, no one can see what I'm doing. I'm just kind of feeling my way through things and like feeling things out. Whereas like in the sun, everything's illuminated and it's like this like feeling of like exposure, and now everyone can see what I'm doing and everything's illuminated and I can't hide. Where in like the darkness of the moon card, I can just like hide and kind of make all my decisions like, well, like this corresponds to this like number numerologically, so like my intuition is saying like go with this.
No, I was absolutely calling you out,
Yeah.
but I feel like because of like the death and awakening, it's almost like, all right, this is a necessary, like another necessary discomfort that I need to like move through and master, and like I'm the fool going into it, but I need to, like, it's something that I need to get better on, and like I can't just keep avoiding it like I do.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the next card we've got is our innermost feelings, which is the Nine of Wands reversed. And okay, so the Nine of Wands upright is like mastering the art of rest and taking breaks, which I feel like really corresponds with the lesson or the wisdom in the Four of Swords, and the rest that we take in the Four of Swords to like process things. The Nine of Wands, it's like a marathon that, you know, when you're running a marathon, sometimes you sprint and sometimes you walk. And the Nine of Wands reversed just shows up when we're finally figuring that out. We're kind of like on our way out of the card and we figured out what it means to be in the Nine of Wands upright. So in terms of what that means is your innermost feelings is like, I think it just translates to you understanding what it means to like build stamina through the lens of kind of what you talked about beforehand about like working working multiple part-time jobs in order to be able to even like make ends meet to live in Vancouver, because like, you know, like in a Wheel of Fortune moment that the universe wants you to be there, but also like it's very much a Nine of Wands kind of energy that you need to use to pull off.
It was definitely like such a struggle. Like I felt like working was basically all I was doing. Like even if I wasn't even working, like I was working 30 hours per week, and I'm working 30 something hours per week now, but it felt different. It felt so much more like frantic. Yeah, I was just going through this like period of like frantically like trying to make ends meet, I guess.
Yeah. And then, okay, so the cards we have for the hopes and fears is the Two of Swords. And something that's kind of come through personally for me with when working through the Two of Swords is this idea that if a space for you does not exist, you need to carve that space out. So you could look at that as a hope, but you could also look at that as like a fear that the space doesn't exist for you. And so I don't know if this is like clear enough, because I know my webcam isn't the greatest, but it's someone holding these swords up to protect them. And I've never thought of it as a sense of they're closed off. Like I think the traditional interpretation is like you're really closed off. But to me, it's always made, whenever I've pulled this card in like my daily draws, it's always made sense more as like I'm carving at space, especially through the lens of I think I pulled this card when I started writing zines on like gender and tarot, and it's like a space for me. Like I've been looking so long for books that were written about gender and tarot, and they don't exist, and like the space just doesn't exist. So I guess I have to carve the space out. Zoe, where are you going?
Sorry, my cats need to get in the room. One sec.
Oh, okay, no worries. Because what the person in the Two of Swords is doing is very like high priestess energy, or maybe even like moon lunar energy. Like we've got the moon kind of up here in the card, symbolizing that they're just kind of carving out space for them to go inwards, and do all the internal like processing, of balancing. If twos are about sacred balance, balancing our thought processes, brain chemistry, mental health even. But yeah, I'm not sure if you can relate it all to like the hope or the fear of whether or not a space for you exists and having to carve that space out.
Yeah, no, again, it all comes back to like being here in Vancouver and all of this like starting over that I've been doing. Because the thing about Vancouver, and I think I've told you this before, is that it is not like Ottawa or even like Ontario in general, because like everyone is so busy, like everyone is in this frantic trying to make ends meet, and like no one has emotional energy or even physical energy, and it's so hard to like create friendships here. And I heard that about Vancouver, but for some reason, my foolish hubris was like, oh, but not for me. But yes, for me.
I'm Zoe and everybody loves me. Yeah.
So I have been very much like, now that I actually have time, like, and energy to do things, I've been like sort of trying to find my space, because like right now my social circle pretty much consists of me and Sam watching Netflix, and then maybe one of our roommates comes in to play video games or something in the living room, and that's sort of my social life. So I've been like making an effort to reach, and it's almost like I'm really hopeful, because I know of all of these cool people here in Vancouver, and a lot of the people that I know have these really like tight social circles, and like this like collectivity that I was talking about earlier. But also part of me has been like, but what if I don't find that? You know, like it's been longer than I'm used to of like not having close friends where I'm living, and like what if there's just not that out there for me? So it's a little bit of both, yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make a note on, like, just noticed that there's no blindfold in the Two of Swords, and I feel like for me that's what kind of made sense of, like, they're not closed off, they're not unable to see something because they're, like, not blindfolded. Like, the at least, like, the interpretation that's come through specifically with working with this deck is, like, not being about closing ourselves off so we literally like can't even see anything outside of our own perception, but about taking away, kind of like in the moon card, we're taking away our sight, we're walking around in the dark so that we're using our intuition rather than our external senses. So yeah, because like I feel like the Two of Swords could even come up around like externally you might be able to see a space for you to exist. But if you close your eyes and feel it intuitively, you're figuring out, oh, wait, that space, like, while it may on the surface level look like there's a space for me, it's like a mirage or like a visual, like optical illusion. And if I try and fill that space, I can't, because that space doesn't exist. And the only way you could like figure that out is like through like using your intuition and like listening to your gut. And I guess another word I like to use for intuition is just our relationship with self and how well we know ourselves, to take it out of the lens of like a very spiritual, like woo-woo context, just like on a really practical level. It's how well we know ourselves, which, yeah, I think ties in really well with awakening reversed. So, yeah. Okay, and then the card for the next card is the big picture, which is the Ace of Swords reversed. And so I love the imagery here. We have kind of like the Ace of the, like, and the slow holler, it's a knife instead of a sword. And and the knife is being a channel. We've got this like energy kind of coming down from the heavens, or this channel opening up. And so I find in the Ace of Swords, what you're learning to do on a big picture is like be a channel. It's almost kind of magician energy. Not in the sense that we're taking something immaterial and like translating it to materiality and manifesting it, but we're just doing the work of being a channel and being very open and present. I feel like a lot of what you were learning in the Wheel of Fortune translates to this, like this idea of turning down all the distractions in your like car when you're on this road trip so that you can actually hear the GPS when you get the instructions to like get off the highway at this exit. Being almost like being like a lightning rod. I know in the I think it's a Smith Rider-Waite. It's the imagery of like a rod being struck by lightning, or even the tower. You have the tower being struck by lightning.
Yeah.
Really open to that like aha moment, that like stroke of brilliance. And yeah, we could look at even like, if this is the card for the big picture, like how does it influence and like intersect with all of these other cards, which I think I kind of already started doing with like the tower in the Wheel of Fortune. But maybe that's something in when we kind of open the floor up that like might be something people want to talk about, if they like see any kind of connections that I'm not making right now off the top of my head with the other cards, in terms of like aha moments or channel moments. Bye, Erica. Thank you.
I mean, I think it also has to do with like again what we were talking about at the very beginning about death and awakening, about like the fact that the loss of a lot of familiar things sort of opens you up to this, I guess, like this spark of inspiration or intuition or whatever. Like you're not gonna get that if you have your life cluttered with stuff that doesn't really matter or isn't important or that you need to like move away from.
Yeah, like really clearing out all the gunk from your channel and like strengthening it. Yeah. Okay. And then the card for the outcome is kind of poignant. At least I know this is maybe a slightly different way of interpreting this card, but it's kind of what specifically resonates with this deck. So we have with the Page of Cups, or the Student of Vessels is the name of the card in the Soul Holler, someone who has this like their heart in a jar. And when the Student of Vessels or Page of Cups shows up reversed, it's a moment when we have a lot of love to give, but we don't know where to put it. Like we have this heart in a jar, and we want to give it to someone or like give it to the world or give it to the collective, but we don't know where to put it. And I feel like that really resonates with the Two of Swords being your innermost feelings of having to carve that space out. Like if you want to, wherever you want to like put your heart, after like going through all of this growth, you're going to have to carve the space out, like make the jar to put your heart in, and carve that space out in order to like give it to someone or put it somewhere. If that makes sense, because I know that's a really abstract analogy. So
I like that. That almost makes me feel better about the Two of Swords.
Yeah.
Like it's almost comforting.
Yeah. And I feel like it could also connect well with the moon reverse of being really in the dark, and how it, not that it's going to be like this forever, but just like this momentary lapse of feeling really tuned out with your intuition, and like it's not, and kind of spacey, and not really centered and grounded and like dropped in with your intuition, if that makes sense. So
it does.
But I feel like it also, like, if we're going back to, if that's the outcome, like going back to the lesson or the wisdom being the Four of Swords, and like like this person's like literally like in a bed with like a cloud above their head. So you could maybe even take that super literally of like keeping a dream journal. Like if your intuition is getting really confusing and the way that you normally work with your intuition isn't giving you answers. I feel like it's also like I was talking about on Instagram the other day, something that like keeps coming through with everyone's tarot readings is like if we're expecting the universe to send us an email and we're only looking at our email inbox, we're going to miss out on the fact that the universe just texted us and sent us, like, our intuition sent us a message over text, and all of a sudden we like think we're getting a no, or that the universe isn't talking to us, or we're just getting silence. But instead it's that we like missed out on the message because we have it like in our inbox or on our phone instead of on our computer. And that just being like a really literal analogy for like what I mean by like a spacey or like spacey intuition, or like we're not dropped in or tuned in with our intuition, and how we get so comfortable in like the universe speaking to us. Like, for example, we talked about yellow punch buggies and how those are signs from the universe. And it's like maybe the universe isn't sending you yellow punch buggies anymore. They're sending you like yellow Mini Coopers. Or yeah, I'm not sure if that makes like the student of Vessels or Page of Cups reversed a little bit easier to work with as an outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I liked that post that you did on Instagram about that the other day too. Like I was reading that and I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like I felt a little bit called out.
And I feel like sometimes too with the Student of Cups, the Page of Cups reversed, I can have a bit of a tantrum, and it's like sometimes the universe is telling me no, or like sometimes I'm just getting silence, and I get really mad because I want an answer. And I just like have this like little tantrum in the Student of Cups reversed over feeling like my intuition is like broken, or like it's not working because I'm not getting the answer that I want. Yeah. So like sometimes it means we're like looking in the wrong place for like the email or the text, or sometimes it just means we're actually looking in the right place. We're just not getting the answer that we want. So yeah, that's the reading. And that's all I have to say on it. I know originally we had structured it so that I read the spread and then Zoe comments on it and then everyone else gets to kind of talk. But we did it a little bit different, and that's cool. So now everyone else gets to talk and kind of comment on things. And I know Davis mentioned that they have to leave at 7:30. So I just wanted to maybe open the floor up to Davis, or like anyone who has to leave earlier. If not that you have to say something, but if there's like something where you're like, oh, I like really love the Three of Wands, that's my card, I want to talk about it. Totally feel free to like unmute yourself and jump in.
Well, I don't have like a whole lot specifically to say, but I'm still like processing and swimming in it. I loved your definition of intuition, as I mentioned in the comments. Like that's the first definition that actually resonates me in any way. It really helps like bring it out of like the woo-woo spiritual community stuff and into like, yeah, like I do know if I like something or if something isn't right for me. So I really like the practicality of that. So thank you so much for that. Zoe, I totally share your, I don't know if aversion is the right word, but like I don't love the moon card. And I think too, like that comes up like in general, like I feel weird around my intuition, or like something I'm really working on right now is trusting that I actually do know myself, and like the decisions that I make are, I don't know, like that are right for me and stuff like that. And so I'm a double air sign, like moon in Gemini, sun in Libra. So like I love knowing the things, and I love having an answer, and I love like knowing why things and having an intellectual relationship to it. So feelings are hard for me to feel. I like to know like why I am feeling a thing, as opposed to just like, you have to feel your feelings. So the moon card is tough for me.
Cool.
So yeah,
I feel like the
that's all I
moon
got.
card, I was thinking about this as Tess was giving the reading, but you kind of reminded me. I feel like the moon card is so much a card about trust, which is what makes it so scary for a lot of people. Like, it is trust as a card.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And trust is scary because you have to trust it.
Yeah, it's like swimming in a lake and you don't know what's at the bottom of the lake, but you like have to go like jump in this lake and swim, and it's like really murky and dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. All right, well, I have to head off now, but thank you so much for this. This is so lovely. Yay.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Bye.
Bye.
Does anyone else have something that they want to talk about? Or any kind of comments? Feel free to just unmute yourself. No pressure. Or if you want, you can always put it in the chat too. Yeah. I'm cool with awkward silence, so I'm just gonna, not to be like a mean teacher, but I'm just gonna sit here till someone unmutes themselves. So like whenever you feel comfortable enough to comment on something. I know like one thing I was thinking really specifically was like looking at all the way the Ace of Swords reversed, and this concept of like opening our channel can connect to like all of the cards that we've got going on here. There's a lot we could look at. Like we have a lot of kind of cards from the third line of, and like the last line of the major arcana. Yeah.
Not to call you out, but you were like, I'm just going to sit here in silence, and immediately starts talking.
Oh, yeah.
Hi,
So it's funny.
All right. Hi, Jess. Oh, wait. Oh, there's, okay, so, no, you're okay. Jess, do you want to go second?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Oh, hi, Imogen.
Hello. Hi. Okay.
Hi.
I'm a little bit shy and awkward, so
No worries.
I'm just gonna try not to stumble. But I just wanted to say how much like the reading, Zoe's reading, resonated with me, because I, like Zoe, also live in Vancouver, and I'm also fumbling through a lot of life changes. So all of this like intuition and trusting in like what just trusting my gut more is like also really tough for me. So I just wanted to say that I relate and I feel you.
Mm-hmm. Aww.
Oh, hi, other person in Vancouver.
Hello.
Friends.
Not that you guys have to be friends now, but I mean, it wouldn't hurt. You do
Hey,
live in
now.
the same city.
Sweet, I'll DM you.
Please, yes. Look
Cool.
at this.
Jess, what did you want to say?
Can you guys hear me?
No, I can't.
Oh no. Okay, let me
No,
try.
no, I'm joking. I'm just messing with you. Sorry. I thought it would come off as really sarcastic, and it didn't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Did not register with me. I'm like, what is technology? Yeah, so first of all, I really like this format of the collective reading. Like whenever I read other people's tarot, I feel like I always learn a lot, and so this was the same thing. It resonated a lot with me as well. Like I don't live in Vancouver, but I graduated from grad school recently, and now I'm moving into like working in a whole bunch of different fields, like freelance kind of writing and teaching, but also doing my own, like I have a skincare thing that I do, and also like counseling people and doing tarot. So there's a lot of needing to follow my intuition in that specific practice, but also in general, just like I feel like in a reading that I did recently, there were 3 of the same cards as well. So it really feels like a call to just trust yourself. Does that make sense? I got what was it? I think it was the 4 of Swords and the 2 of Swords both. I think it was those 2.
And so it very much felt like a time for rest. And like you said, clearing out all the distractions so that you can actually hear what you need to do.
Yeah. Like everything that's like distracting you from being really present and like focused and in the present moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also I was doing like a like romance spread for myself. And I got it was like, what warning do you need to hear? And it was the Three of Swords. I was like, oh fuck. Like
that's like the worst card to get in a relationship spread. Oh my god.
It's like, it was like the last card in the Celtic Cross, and it was like a warning that you won't see coming. I was like, God, are you fucking kidding me? Like, okay, cool, good to know. Like, work on yourself and learn all this stuff, but like, it's still not gonna work out. Like, okay, cool.
Thanks.
But the outcome card was the Two of Swords, and I was like, okay, it's like, sure, it's not gonna work out with the other person, but like, and another one that it related to was the Queen of Swords. So like, and I just listened to Lindsay Mack's podcast on the Queens, which is super helpful. So the Queen of Swords being all about setting boundaries and mixing air and water. So like learning to set those boundaries, and maybe setting those boundaries is what's going to cause that heartbreak to happen. But ultimately it's what's best for me still. Like, sure, it maybe won't work with that person, but that is what will actually help me grow, is like listening to that intuition and knowing what I need to do for myself.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I did just have one question. If I can throw it back to you. You talked a little bit about like tarot and the nervous system, and I think I've heard you say something about that before. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Just that, I guess the way that I've always approached tarot is through the lens of mental health, because I've used it, well, I guess like through a politically focused lens, because I discovered it during like my history and political science degree. But I was also kind of like, whenever I couldn't afford a therapist, which is like been pretty much like all of the time, like with like free therapy, they give you like 6 sessions and then that's kind of it. So I realized that I could only really talk about my surface level stuff in therapy, and that anything below the surface I was going to have to work through with tarot. So for example, sometimes I've heard of therapists pulling cards face up. So when you like start your therapy session, you have like all of these cards face up, and you pick a card that for like what you want to talk about for the therapy session face up based off of what visually resonates for you. And I've always found that practice personally super helpful, using tarot as like a therapeutic or like mental health tool, because it allows me to journal about anything that I don't have language to articulate yet, that are just like really deep kind of subconscious feelings that I can pull out through the visuals of a card, but might not have the words to give or language to give to that feeling.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess that's like when I talk about like the nervous system, like it just means like when I pulled that card reversed, usually what happens is my like brain is like the Fool reverse being like my brain freaking out and like a lot of fear coming up around having to take a leap of faith. It's not a no that we're not supposed to take the leap of faith. It's just me honoring my nervous system and not forcing myself to take a leap of faith when I'm really scared. Or like I guess to go a little bit further in the Fool reverse, meaning like the Fool upright, when we take a leap of faith, it might feel like butterflies, but it shouldn't feel terrifying. Or like Awakening reversed, we might be, have butterflies about crossing the threshold, but it shouldn't be terrifying. And we have to figure out whatever we need to do to really soothe our nervous system in order to get to a place where crossing the threshold is a butterfly excited feeling and not a oh my god, my life is about to end if I do this kind of fear. So yeah, I'm not sure if that directly answers your question. I think it does indirectly, but
yeah, no, that was great.
Yeah, cool.
Like as someone who does like empathic counseling, as I call it, on other people, that's a great way of looking at it. And like not, I'm always really conscious of not pushing people beyond where they want to go.
Yeah. Another thing, like in terms of practicing, like, because one of the things that I'm hoping comes out of doing collective tarot readings in a group setting like this is that you all start to feel more comfortable with what it looks like to read tarot for someone else. Because I know when I was like learning to read tarot for strangers, it is really different than reading tarot for yourself. And I got like super self-conscious and had like about a year's worth of imposter syndrome to really work through. Like, I'm a fake tarot reader, and every time I read it for someone else, they're gonna find out and like catch me. Like the tarot police are gonna arrest me. But yeah. Okay, sorry. And I was relating that back to oh no, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, my ADHD meds are wearing off. What were we talking? What was the
I'd asked about the nervous system.
The nervous system, and I was talking about how I practice tarot. Oh, I think what I was relating it back to is like how tarot for me has always been most helpful when I've been able to use it like carrying my tarot deck around with me, and like I don't know about you guys, but like I like have like a list of like the best bathrooms to cry in, because I often get like triggered in public. So there's like I have a mental list of like, okay, these are like the 5 public bathrooms closest to me, and here's like my favorite one to cry in of all of them, or my least shitty one to cry in. But yeah, and so I'll often like pull a tarot card when it's like, okay, like I'm stuck in the bathroom. I can't call my therapist because I don't have an on-call therapist, so I'm just going to pull a tarot card and see how I can like soothe my nervous system, or like what can I find about this card that's like helpful and medicinal, rather than looking at tarot card interpretations as like things I'm supposed to watch out for or like not do. Kind of like how we like looked at the Two of Swords in a little different way. Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't remember how I was linking that back to what I was saying at that point. So we'll just leave that. Sorry.
Well, I really appreciate your reading of the Two of Swords. I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. Everyone cut me off.
No.
Because when I was looking up, I got the Two of Swords and I was just thinking through it myself, and I was thinking about reading it as like the your thoughts as blocking you from seeing your intuition, or like you're getting in your own way of feeling, because there's all that water and the moon and the card. It's like, okay, you need to like see what you can't see easily. But I really liked that the slow holler card doesn't have a blindfold on, and that it's a way more active card.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you are also kind of getting somewhere with that, because we do have a lot of like, okay, so in my deck in the slow hauler, the tower is actually the storm, which is also super watery. And it's reversed and also very abstract, so it probably doesn't look like much from here, but it's like a very angry red paint splotches kind of storm, or like the eye of a storm, I find. And I feel like we could totally talk about like the balance of water, especially if the outcome is like a student of cups. The slow hauler renames pages students. They're studying their cup. It's like that moment where I guess the way that I work with the ace to 10 versus the court cards of a suit is it's like super elemental. So in the ace to 10 of cups, you're focusing on mastering the element of water as a single element. And when you get to the court cards, you're learning how to hold 2 elements together. So students being earth and or pages being earth and cups being water. And so like the student of cups is that first moment where you get out of the ace to 10, having mastered that in the 10 of cups, and you step into the student, and you're actually just like stopping to hold your cup and hold your vessel and hold your heart and like talk to it and study it. And like what that means to study water and like study the balance of water, of like, are things too wet or too dry? Like how do we like swim in a pool or like a lake, wherever you're swimming, or the ocean. How do you swim in the ocean without drowning? Or like to be in the ocean but not of the ocean, or like in the water but not of the water, like submerged in it but not drowning. Especially if we're looking at like the death card as a card for the present moment and learning how to like nurture and compost is like literally like hot juicy dirt. So yeah. We also, the moon card, I really like here, has in the imagery has the ellipsis or an infinity sign. And so that's kind of, for me, it's always like, oh yeah, the moon is like related to intuition. And I guess to kind of talk a little bit more about like water stuff and what I mean, like the Suit of Cups being about our intuition rather than our emotions. Not that those two can't be linked, but sometimes our intuition and emotions can be separate. So like, I know sometimes people interpret certain cards in the Suit of Cups as falling in love with other people or our emotions in relation to others externally outside of ourselves. Whereas if we're working with the concept of like as above, so below, meaning the external is a reflection of the internal, or the material is a reflection of the immaterial, that means that cups are about a relationship with self first and foremost, meaning our intuition, how well we know ourselves, how well we trust our gut. And then they're always going to be about our relationships with other people, just like as an extension of that, because we're working with internal self first, external self or external relationships as just a mirror reflection for the internal processes. So I guess that's kind of also to like elaborate on kind of what I was talking, or what Davis was talking about like how we define our intuition and like where I came up with that definition. Yeah. Cool. Does anyone else have anything they want to share, or like any connections they made or things that resonated for them with the spread?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Hello. Yeah, so first off, I'll say that it's hilarious and wonderful that the one person that I know on this call is Zoe.
No way!
Yeah.
Wild.
No shit. Yeah, dark cards have always been like my jam. Like having to like deal with like the death card in a spread has been my thing since I first started doing tarot, and at first it was like, what the fuck? But I've come to really appreciate it and be like, nope, this is where it is and where I'm at. I really appreciated the description of the tower as hopeful destruction. I think that's like really, really beautiful. And then the one thing that I just wanted to add, especially Zoe, since you were talking about like the tendency to punish yourself or to think that like you were deserving of punishment or things like that, whenever the 9 of Wands comes up, for me, it's like a moment to kind of take stock and like reflect on all like that you've done and how far you've come and the things that you have put into like living what you're currently living, and that there's much to be proud of in that like reflective moment. And especially I think that card was in the position of like inner reflection or something.
Yeah, or innermost feelings.
Yeah, to just like, especially if you have a tendency towards punishment, to take that as an opportunity to be like, no, I've done some shit. I've made some choices, and like while there are still challenges, like this is pretty powerful stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
That's all.
Okay. Cool. I'm also gonna say like bye to Christina because they just messaged in the chat that they're leaving. So bye. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, Lauren, thank you so much for sharing. Cool. Does anyone else have something to add, or yeah, any like personal experiences of like moments where you've like been in the tower and this is what's helped you get through it, that kind of thing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey. First, I want to say congrats to Jessica for completing grad school. That's awesome.
Woohoo. Yeah.
Awesome. I have my undergraduate graduation on Saturday, so
Oh,
I feel that.
congratulations.
Finishing things up. Woo.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, like, I really loved what you said about the Four of Swords, which every time comes up for me, I'm like, I don't know what to do with you. And I just really liked creating a space to kind of heal from trauma after dealing with the Three of Swords.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I loved that, and I wanted to know if you could expand on that, because I'm just like,
Yeah.
pick your brain on it.
In the I think what I forgot to where I didn't go with it and where I was trying to go with it and got distracted was with the imagery of the coffin and the Four of Swords. So the Three of Swords, we're learning to pull the swords out so the wounds could scab over and heal. And in the Four of Swords, we're putting ourselves in this coffin because the three swords from the Three of Swords can't penetrate the coffin. They're stopping. There's like a boundary, kind of like how I think someone brought up also the Queen of Swords. I think it was Jess. I'm not sure because I'm forgetting already and it's only been 2 minutes. But I think it was we talked about the Queen of Swords and setting boundaries. And like that's like the walls of like the coffin that we're using to prevent the Three of Swords from piercing through and like stopping. So that we can do all the like internal like wound healing and like really digging deep and like excavating all of the old wounds that have all scabbed over from like any Three of Swords moments we've been in beforehand. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that.
Cool.
I love the creating creating a safe space of healing after, like in the three you said like you're letting yourself scab over, but it's also any type of physical scab also comes with an emotional one, and like letting yourself like have that space, that energy. I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you get like an actual wound, you put like vitamin E oil on it afterwards to help with the scarring. It's like that work. We like let it scab over, but then like what's the healing stuff that you do after the scab is like gone. You have to, like do the actual skin healing part with like whether it's through like herbal stuff or just like I know we use vitamin E oil. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. Thanks.
Cool. No problem. So I think I'll probably wrap it up at 8. So we have time for one more person if anyone else has something that they want to share. And I'll just give it a second, and if not, then I will end with the singing bowl again to kind of close everything off.
I kind of have something, but it's mostly just thank you for the reading, and thank you for asking me to sort of be the guinea pig for this. I loved it, and I really appreciate everyone here holding space for this reading, and I appreciate your contributions too. Like it makes my heart so full.
Aw. It's so good. To like quote Zoe. Zoe always is like, it's so good. Yeah, so I guess I will do some really quick housekeeping before then I close with the invocation so that the invocation can kind of be like the last thing to close everything off with. But yeah, if you have any like comments or like feedback, you're more than welcome to send me an email. I believe I sent everyone an email this afternoon, so you should have my email in your inbox and you can just reply to that one. I know one thing specifically that I'm still kind of wrangling with is how to pick, like I specifically picked Zoe for this because it was the first time I was doing it and I felt most comfortable reading for Zoe because I've been reading tarot for them for years. But in the future, it's going to be kind of open to anyone who wants to be the person on the receiving end of things. And so I'm kind of not sure on one hand like how to be fair when picking, but also how to make sure that the person understands that when you're receiving the reading you do have to feel comfortable enough like being really open and sharing, whereas normally when we give a reading and it's just an individual reading, it's really up to you where you want to set the boundaries and what you want to talk about with the person reading your cards, whereas in this case, you do have to be a little bit more open and willing to share and like comfortable. So yeah, if like that's like one thing specifically I'm looking for feedback on or any ideas. But yeah, feel free to send me an email. Thank you so much for coming and like to like everyone that came. And I'm just so honored to get to like share and read tarot with everyone and kind of have these like ideas bouncing around of different ways of interpreting cards and like ways that cards on a practical level like resonate for us and like the personal connections we make with them. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I am just going to, one thing that is really important to me when I invite my ancestors to provide any sort of like blessings or wisdom during a tarot reading is to also close the portal so it's not like they're just all hanging out, or so my ancestors can't just like send me like messages randomly throughout the day and it's like really distracting because I'm trying to do, I don't know, it's like when you're driving you don't want like necessarily intuitive hits to be showing up. So I just wanted to thank the ancestors of spirit, land, and blood for holding this space with us. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. And how do I, oh, here's the button to end the meeting. Okay. Bye.